Today is April 28th, 2023. The Recovery Task Force for Lee County will convene. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I do apologize for being a few minutes late. Secretary of the DEO is here, and we were chatting in my office, and we walked over here. So if you wouldn't mind, Madam Secretary, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for inviting me. And I was told today, so it's his birthday today. I don't know if everybody knew that. So happy birthday. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Commissioner Ruane over the past several months. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Meredith Ivey. I'm the acting secretary at the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. I've been at the agency for about 2 years. I got my start at the agency working as Secretary Dane Eagles, Chief of Staff, who I know many of you know and are friends with. And, you know, for us, Hurricane Ian, it felt personal. This was a very tough time for the folks of Southwest Florida, but I commend you for your hard work, your efforts. I haven't been here since October. We were all boots on the ground, myself and about 100 of my colleagues. We all deployed and helped co-locate and provide services with other state agencies alongside FEMA at the disaster recovery centers. We actually had 2 sites, one in downtown Fort Myers and another one in the county. And you know, we were down here for over a month, and we'll be in this with you over the coming years. I so happy that y'all have gotten significant funding that you need to move forward with the important infrastructure and housing projects that lie ahead. At DEO, we have the Office of Long-Term Resiliency. I'm joined by my colleague, Justin Domer. He's our director of that office. He has great federal and state experience. So at DEO, we have received over $900 million to help with 20 other counties. I'm personally joined by Justin, visiting all 24 counties across the state that were impacted last year by Hurricanes Ian and Nicole, including the 4 counties, including Lee County, that received a direct allocation. And we're in this together. The governor believes very strongly, so does Director Guthrie, as do I, that no matter how the funds come in, we at the leadership level, we need to collaborate. We need to do everything we can to make sure that we move the ball forward as swiftly as possible and help our communities get back on their feet. So much work has been done. Even walking around this morning, it's amazing to see the progress that's been made, and that's just a testament to how hard each of you has worked to help your community. So it's an honor to be here today and to see some of you again, and here to help however we can. And again, I share greetings from the governor as well.
Thank you very much. Really, we're blessed to have you and be here with us. It's been an honor the last couple of months, as you had indicated, for us to get to know each other. You've had, obviously open ears, and obviously every potential request that we have. We applaud you for the intervention with revenue replacement, and certainly allowing all of us to obviously continue to get our feet back on the ground. I do believe that Lee County has the ability to certainly come back. I have 100% confidence, if not more, that we will come back. We just obviously need an investment, and that's the word that I've continued to use, not only with the secretary, but also with all members, both in the House and the Senate. This is an investment. Oddly enough, right now, the state's forecasting that over $7 billion is going to be greater than what was projected for sales tax. In Lee County, based on the reports, certainly appears that we're contributing almost 30% of that. So that's $2.1 billion in additional sales tax that was forecasted greater than what was initially forecasted. So as we've gone through Tallahassee, we've continued to indicate what we need and what we really would like. We talk about it as an investment, and we believe once our economic engines get all turned back on, when our hospitality is up, when obviously bed tax, the trickle down effect that that has and the job creation that it has is significant for all of us. So we recognize that, the toll revenue, and obviously we're a tourist destination. We have people coming back here and we know what we'll be able to do. It's been astonishing to me to see real estate continue to sell at the pace it is. When we initially talked to the people from Bay County, they had prepared us for a 20% potential slip in population. They received that type of decrease with people leaving. From every indication we have, we're flat to up based on the pluses and minuses. So that's a testament to people wanting to come here back to Lee County. I'm really proud to be able to be part of this group. I recognize that you all have individual needs within your city, but I do continue to believe as we work through Tallahassee, as we work through DC, together we obviously can look at visions and make sure we have addressed the issues that we need to address to make sure we're much more resilient. So it's an honor, honestly, I can't say it enough, for you to come down here, Meredith, and it's really been an honor to get to know you and work with you, and I look forward to continuing to do that over the years.
Same
Thank
here,
you.
Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, may I add one more thing that I forgot to, I was remiss in mentioning during the special session that occurred before the current legislative session. Senate President Pasadomo and Governor DeSantis were instrumental in the local government emergency bridge loan. So new program at DEO, we were given $50 million and we awarded our first award, $11.9 million to Fort Myers Beach. I was actually able to surprise Mayor Allers. We brought him in to meet with the governor, and the governor personally handed him the check a few weeks ago. So we're for any of the local communities here, sir, who are interested in that program, we're here to help and support, and feel free to get with me offline if you need anything on that program.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was certainly one theme that we all talked about in all our presentations when we saw the local delegation, revenue replacement. And, I'm pleased to hear that. My concern as someone that's been in this a little bit longer than others is really this upcoming year. I'm most concerned about the 23 collection at the end of November, December. Many people that obviously had mortgages, the event took place September 28th. At December, the end of the year, banks gave many of their mortgagees 6 months of a deferral. Well, that put them into the March category. Well, come November, if you didn't get adequate insurance settlements, your home has been necessarily repaired, you might have 60 or 70% outstanding with the bank based on the value. And I wouldn't even know what the value is if it's in a condition of obviously repair that's required. That becomes an issue. So it's going to be challenging to see, because right now I think we're all surprised when we looked at ad valorem taxes, the way we're trending, we're pretty close to where we hope to be, obviously, before the storm. We're not really substantially off. The other revenue streams have been greatly impacted, but that has not. I am concerned about what, play. I've had the privilege of working with Matt Caldwell. You are. And honestly, one of the things trying to zone in on is just how many mortgages are out there on the 550,000 parcels, whether it's commercial or residential, just trying to get a feel for what that's going to look like, because those are some of the challenges. And I think the sooner we have that type of data, and that's what's good about these task force, we can come up with information that's going to give us some greater insight to obviously guide us through this situation. So I can't thank you enough. I can't thank this group for getting together. But honestly, those are my opening comments. Certainly don't have much more to say. I appreciate the fact that you all have set time aside. We're keeping our fingers crossed as Tallahassee is working through the Senate and the House. We certainly look like we're very pleased with the way things are. We're going to keep our fingers closed, but some of the significant things we had on our list, certainly the bridges seem like they're in the right path. So we're going to just continue to keep our fingers crossed, continue to walk down this path, and hopefully the funding continues to happen. And I know that the legislators will not only ask for the ability to help us, but they really would like a 5-year CIP. It's later in the agenda, but they would really like to know what our needs look like for the next 5 years. So collectively, we need to do that some of the challenges, as you know, when I testified up in Tallahassee, is when I look at water and the connection throughout the cities and throughout the county, we have a fragmentation of providers for water. And there's a lot of assistance for utilities that are managed by Lee County. There's a lot of different things that can be done, but we're relying on nonprofits like when I was on Sanibel Island Water or Pine Island Water. Those obviously entities are nonprofits trying to help, Lee County. If we all recall, during the storm, we had disruptions to our water systems. So, I encourage and will continue to encourage the legislators to look at what we have a requirement to do is provide potable water to all the citizens in Lee County. And I'd like to have them disregard who the provider is, because we need to obviously become much more resilient in that regard. So just the fact that it's a nonprofit, the county has some of its own facilities we actually take care of, and we actually have a contractor that manages some of them as well. So that's going to be a challenge we'll have. We'll work through Tallahassee, because hardening those situations, having those transmission lines that go from point A to point B, I don't want it to stop at a particular area. I look at, governing on Sanibel. I want to be able to have the connection from Captiva through Sanibel and continue on. I want to go from unincorporated Lee County to a city. I want to make sure we do that. And I really, encourage the legislature to think about, what we're trying to do and provide to the citizens of Lee County. And we need to try to be much more creative, because there's a lot of regulations, a lot of restrictions that are going to get in the way. So we're going to have to think outside the box. And that's just one thing that I'm, want us to think about as we continue to look at this situation, as we approach this. But those are my opening comments. Certainly we'll turn it over to Terry. It's been honestly great to continue to work with you all. And I know together we will certainly come out of this much better than we were before. Thank you. So has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
I have a motion to approve.
A motion to approve on the floor. I have a second. Any discussion? Anyone against? Passing unanimously. Thank you. Now you may
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you, Commissioner, and welcome, Secretary Ivy. So pleased that you're spending time. The Recovery Task Force has been an amazing civic response to the devastation here. Very proud to play a small part in supporting this work. Prior to the hurricane, we had scheduled a region-wide conversation to gain a lot of public engagement, and that was rescheduled immediately after the hurricane, fortuitously to March 30th, which fell right in the middle of our window of gathering a lot of public comment and input for the Recovery Task Force. The results are in. We had over 1,000 surveys collected, which was about 20%. So we had close to 5,000 people participating on that single day. And the topic of recovery and resilience was top of mind. Echoing the comments of Commissioner Ruane about the fragmentation, the number one issue that was brought up for this was around cooperation at the nonprofit sector and across jurisdictions. You can see the profile that this was a 5-county participation of residents throughout the communities here, but over half of those were from Lee County themselves. It skews a little older, as our population does, predominantly white, but good representation from the Hispanic and African American communities, more college educated. And these numbers help us to gauge for the town halls how to redouble our communications and outreach efforts to get more diverse representation from our population. Next slide, please. So there is real thirst for people wanting to participate in tackling the important issues of our region. And people are looking at finding real solutions. There's an action orientation, as you would expect from the character of our fellow residents. That top interest in collaboration. There's fragmentation among the nonprofit sector. There's a fragmentation among our jurisdictions. But what the hurricane has showed is part of our resilience is that civic resilience infrastructure, and how do we bring together? And that's a key role that the Recovery Task Force will play during the planning and when the plan is developed there. Very much about raising awareness for people with the opportunities, a theme that is carried on through the town hall meetings themselves. Finally, the top 10 issues here at the top, as we know, it's housing and homelessness, it's the mental health, it's healthcare access costs, K-12 education, the jobs and economic development, very much, and then hunger, environment, transportation, early childhood development, and generational poverty. And I see people are taking notes with their phones on these. These slides are also always posted on resilientlead.com or .org after these meetings as well. So that gives you a sense of what is on the minds of a broad cross-section of residents here. And we'll go into later the additional survey results, that our survey activity that we are gaining through the town halls. With that, let me turn it over to Tanya, who will provide an update on CDBG-DR. And thank you. And our partners, Ben Siegel at the airport, they continue to share space for their display windows. If any of you have flown out recently, you'll see these very attractive screens that are up there. The Share Your Voice was the QR code to provide input on the survey, but then broadly the Resilient Lee slide has stayed up and will stay up as we're engaged in this process. Okay, Tanya.
Also, thank you for those who have been able to come to the town halls. We've had 4 town halls thus far, many more to go, and we have conducted extensive outreach. I want to give a shout out to Chairman Persons. Thank you in terms of the school district has been reaching out via text and email to all the families and educators within the community. We have been working with the county's emergency management and reaching out to faith-based organizations that are active in disasters. We are working with the county's Human and Veteran Services as well, and also working with all of your different public information officers to get the information out and have provided a press release and updates to those press releases as we have shifted some of the dates for the town halls. We've been engaging in social media as well as just personal outreach. We have a team of 4 that are reaching out to different community stakeholders and organizations and encouraging participation in the following town halls, as well as street outreach. So with those 4 town halls, we've had over 100 community participants thus far. We have also been encouraging them to participate online through the press releases and the different. I think we've had 13 media articles done thus far. We have yesterday we exceeded 1,000 responses to the survey and getting that input, and we'll start calculating that data and have it to you on a report on how that is going so far. Overall, each town hall has been interesting because they've all had a very different focus of what the conversation's on. For example, in San Carlos, the conversation very much focused on drainage, specific, not just infrastructure in general, but drainage very specifically. In Fort Myers, it was social services. And then in North Fort Myers, it was a wide discussion of how to encourage community participation and within the housing discussion. So we're excited to continue that conversation. But as we'll talk about a little bit later, SBA and home loans and economic injury loans have been a topic that has been brought up at every town hall thus far. This is what the photos from our last town hall in Bonita Springs with Councilman Corey kicking off the town hall at Bonita Springs Elementary. And just for visualization of, for those of you who haven't been able to attend, what we do is that we do a presentation takes between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how much discussion there is. San Carlos, there was a lot of discussion. In other areas, it was more they wanted to engage with the activities, but we asked them to look at what are the priorities that are being discussed within the branches to date, and to identify which one through the stickers best speaks to what is their priority. And then there are questions that they fill out on a Post-it that identifying, are there any priorities that are missing? And then there's some prompting questions to get their input. We've had a lot of folks put their opinions and additional input through these activities. Switching to the next item on the agenda. Before I do that, any questions about the town halls? All right, excellent. I think we have like 4 or 5 of them next week, so I hope to see some of you all there. With the next item on the agenda is the identifying some initial projects through the form that we submitted to you all on March 31st. So the intention of the form is that to identify projects from the Recovery Task Force that can be utilized through the unmet needs assessment that the county will be performing in support of the development of the action plan. That is why there's a little bit of the urgency in terms of we are asking that folks turn in their projects if they would like it to be part of the unmet needs assessment by May 26th. This is subject to potential change because this is based off of an assumption that the Federal Register will be released at the beginning of May. If it doesn't get released at the beginning of May, then that deadline will be pushed back. But we wanted to give some kind of level of urgency to everybody of having those discussions with regards to potential projects. These could be infrastructure projects, housing projects, economic development initiatives. I've had a couple discussions with several of you earlier this morning in terms of there's definitely a need for potentially a program that provides assistance for folks that are having issues with their insurance provider and unable to have the resolution that they need to build back their homes. So don't need to think in the box of just CDBG-DR, Community Development Block Grants, Disaster Recovery, but the ask is that these projects are submitted, and if you're able to get them in before May 26th, they then can be incorporated into the unmet needs assessment and identifying what those needs are throughout the community. It is not a end-all be-all. There will be a formal process that is laid out within the action plan on how to formally submit projects for funding through CDBG-DR, but this is to get an understanding of what are the needs of the community as part of that process. So it does not need multiple paragraphs in terms of what the projects are, but just a couple of sentences and an estimated cost of what these different initiatives or projects that you would like to see implemented with CDBG-DR. It is also not just limited to what your jurisdiction is going to do. If there are partnerships that with nonprofit or co-op utility providers, housing authorities, and things along those lines, you can also submit those types of projects on their behalf. We will not be looking at all projects that are submitted across multiple funding streams. We're currently doing an analysis of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, IIJA, and identifying other funding streams that can potentially support the types of projects that you're submitting. Is there any questions in terms of the intent of the form, any issues that you're having in submitting projects, any questions that you may have? Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, based upon the initial projects that have been submitted, and based upon the experience of the city, is there any surprises with respect to something that's not there?
So not actually a lot of projects have been submitted yet. I believe a lot of you are working with your staffs to develop them and flesh them out. What I encourage you to do is think big. What we saw in Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle is some jurisdictions were thinking like this types of projects that are submitted for like Cat 2s, for regular disasters, as weirdly as that sentence sounds. But this funding is once in a generation level funding of identifying projects that are going to have that once in a generation impact in the tens, 20s of millions of dollars that cost, of thinking at that grand of a level, because that's the type of funding that is going to be flowing with in this post-catastrophic event. So definitely encourage and working with your teams in identifying what were the projects, and I think this is the next slide. What were the projects that were on your capital improvement plans before? That, you know, this was a need, but just the funding stream, it was something that was going to take decades to do, to be able to identify the 30, $40 million that are needed to be able to do this significant change. There may be, and this is something that we were speaking with the commissioner earlier on, is that what you had in your capital improvement projects prior to the event may now have a different look and feel to them, or they're even more of a need. And there's opportunity to partner with other entities, such as the electrical or water management nonprofits and co-ops, through those partnerships, able to do larger and more impactful type projects, where in the past the budgets would not be able to permit those such large leaps in one bound. So that would be my encouragement thus far. So the form is on the right. It is relative, it has been included in all of our emails to you all in terms of the different announcements and updates that we're providing. So we'll continue to provide that link. But if you have any issues, please let the support team know. And if there's any kind of discussions that you'd like to have with regards to projects. Well, if we have any questions, we'll reach out. If it looks like it's something that maybe is fundable under public assistance or other types of funding streams, then we kind of have a conversation on how to flesh it out to identify exactly what the ask is. But we're available if there's any conversations that need to be had with you or your staff in terms of what the intent is this form. All right. And the form will remain open for projects after the 26th. It's just once the Federal Register drops, the clock starts. So we're using a process that similarly we have used in other jurisdictions that have received over $1 billion in CDBG-DR, of collecting information for that unmet needs assessment. And having that information from you all will greatly benefit in communicating the needs to HUD. With that, we have a question for you guys for capital improvement plans. So one of the best practices in terms of not starting from scratch, what we want to bring to the different branches are looking at what was being discussed as a need prior to the event, because most likely that need was further exacerbated by the event, by Hurricane Ian. So we'll be collecting all of your capital improvement plans and being able to provide that, but recognizing that some of them are very, very long. We would like to understand from you all, what are some criteria in highlighting those projects to the branches of if they are going to be flushing them out and potentially incorporating them as part of some of their recommendations that funding be prioritized for. What are some of those criteria that you would like to be looked at, or specific types of projects that you would like them to look at in that discussion that they're having at the branch level? So this question posed to you all, is there certain types of projects that you would very much like them to look at, whether it be addressing a very specific type of hazard, or if they are or water resiliency and things along those lines?
I have a question. Okay. So we were in the planning stages of building a rec center, which in hindsight, if it would have been built, we'd now have a resilient location to operate out of. It's shovel ready. Now, is this a situation where if we try to propose that if we get ahead of it, that we're not going to be eligible for funding?
in terms of if you're getting ahead of it, if you start breaking ground immediately now, are you able to seek funding later? What I'd recommend is that you complete environmental reviews is largely the biggest step that needs to be taken prior to breaking ground for any kind of CDBG-DR or really any kind of federal funding. So working with your staff to make sure that you're checking all the boxes for CDBG-DR so that you have the highest likelihood that you can seek funding at a later state. CDBG-DR is not like the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program that you can't go backwards and fund projects or initiatives that happen before officially being awarded. But if you don't do that environmental review, and then you don't do those other compliance steps like Davis-Bacon and Section 3 within your construction practices, then you can't go after the funding. So ways to maximize your ability to seek funding on projects that are already going is to check all those CDBG-DR boxes for compliance requirements from the beginning, and then advocate for the project to be funded once we get to that step in the process. So in terms of recreation, so hardened facilities for potential community use post events. One of the conversations I've been having in a couple of the branches is something that's called like Resilience Hub, but just locations that are hardened, not necessarily shelters, but that the community knows is a resource that they can go for information, resources before and after an event. Is that a type of, I think I've heard a couple of your discussions in your jurisdictions that may be a need.
And I have one more question, because we don't have a lot of large land blocks. If we want to do some workforce housing, it'd probably be small projects. Can we group those projects together, or are they all individual?
You can put them into one block as one ask if this is a total, and then have within the description and identifying that it would be a bunch of this number of homes or apartments within this area. So you could break it up. I'd recommend putting it together. It's easier to manage larger projects than it is for smaller projects. In terms of your guys' capital improvement plans, what were some of the priorities prior to Hurricane Ian that were further exacerbated by Hurricane Ian? Yes, Corey.
Well, obviously, one in Bonita Springs is the stormwater management, especially along the Imperial River and Spring Creek, Oak Creek. We passed a special levy for that purpose that provides us funds and could provide us bonding authority, but the need is for many more dollars over a long period of time than we have now. And so we're looking for additional ways we might be able to utilize this CDBG money to speed up, if you will, the protections that we need to better manage our stormwater.
Okay, so stormwater management, stormwater protection type projects.
Flooding. Yeah.
Flooding. Okay. Any other types of projects that you were all kind of at a sprint prior to Hurricane Ian on that now is even further an issue? Yes.
Good morning. I'm just looking, I brought up our legislative priorities. I mean, one of the main things that we've been working with Captiva, of course, was subject to sewer conversion. So that's been a long-term project that we're looking at. Captiva is mainly serviced by their septic tanks. We have just completed an extensive redo of our Donex facility, which accepts there has to be an interlocal agreement. So that's something for overall water quality, of course, and pretty much took care of a lot of the areas on San Miguel. Our lift stations for our sewer were all underwater and impacted pretty much from soup to nuts on our end. So I believe that you do have a copy of our priorities as well.
Excellent. So with,
I mean, I'll go back to my initial comment, and I'll just work off of Councilwoman Smith's comments, I mean, we certainly need to look at water as a whole, and whether it's lift stations, whether it's transmission lines, whether it's the actual plant itself, there's a combination of multiple parts. As I had the privilege of looking through each one of your delegation packages, the amount of money that we're going to need to harden facilities throughout the county certainly starts with more commas than I'd like to think about. We're going to need to really think, and I think collectively as a group, really advocate to the legislator that we need to provide water and potable water to our community. And it really should not be an impediment if you're a nonprofit. I mean, we have an obligation, and because there's a facility set up, some of the bigger cities in the county that has the opportunity to do utilities is great, but there's so many smaller entities that provide that. And there was breaches throughout the entire system. So again, on top of a capital project that I know that I want to make sure we put on the list, because Senator Albritton was the one that asked us to submit what looks to be a 5-year plan and try to give the best guesstimates you could to when you actually might think they're ready. They're going to be ready for 24, 25, if there are multiple fundings. But we collectively really need to look at water and potable water and wastewater and see what has been impacted by that, because I couldn't agree more. The challenge we had over in Sanibel was trying to obviously make the connection between Captiva and Sanibel, but then the storm had so many more impacts to the infrastructure necessary for that to take place. I can't think about a connection until I actually improve the transmission lines and lift stations. We have to obviously repair those. And, we have to go to the nonprofits, Island Water, Pine Island Water. We need to talk to them, because we need to obviously just convince the legislators that we have a responsibility to provide water throughout the entire community. And to me, the fact that I have given the responsibility to an independent company and I have an interlocal agreement with FGUA should be insignificant. It shouldn't be an impediment, because they're still providing the service. They just have some resources in a particular area that we found to be very effective in obviously providing that service. So it's just something that, as a group, I know as I look through each and every package, we're going to really have to look at that as a whole. And me, as someone that's part of this, I would want to make sure that we all can get behind the fact that if Captiva has an issue and they want to connect to Sanibel, Island Water is going to have to be part of the discussion and whatever their needs might need, because the entire system has to be hardened. And that's just something that, when you think about the couple of things that went on during the storm, major property damage, which caused debris. We had electric interruption, and that conversation is going to need to be taken. Listen, when I was in the city of Sanibel, I remember during Irma, we replaced so many concrete poles along Sandcap as you went deeper into Sanibel, and they all snapped. So the conversation about going underground is another conversation that we're going to need to do to think, how do we harden? I mean, certainly working with a person like Sid Kitson, who lost a skylight at Babcock Ranch, he certainly is the model in that community, is one that did things to prepare themselves. So I look at not only power, but I look at water, or just basic things we knew right away. Everything else is property that we all could look at and what's the need. In my opinion, we globally need to provide water, both potable water, wastewater, or any type of disruption that happened. We need to replace it and or repair it and or harden it. So that's just something that I would put on your list to do that. And that dollar amount, as I went through different packages, is significant. 30 million here on transmission lines, 20 million here for lift stations, backup generators. All those things are essential ingredients for it to actually work through the process. Each one has a part that obviously helps us get to the end product, where I either flush my toilet or I actually turn on the faucet and something comes out of it. And I remember being at the EOC and, making some tough decisions that we had to evacuate Lee Health. And I don't think we ever need to be in that situation ever again. We need to do whatever we can to avoid that. And if the legislators have a problem that we have some nonprofits out there, they have to recognize that they're servicing our community. And they should be looked at as the provider for utilities, whether it's for unincorporated Lee County in Pine Island or in Sanibel, it's Island Water. They should not be looked at differently because, again, the collateral or the people that are most affected by it are the citizens of Lee County. So that is really when I look at top things that you knew instantaneously, that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Terry?
I'm going to throw something at you. Sorry.
Good. The school district, the sooner we can get our schools back up and running after a catastrophic event. So hardening all the schools, not just the shelters, but all the schools, because that frees the parents to be able to go do what they need to do. Also gets food into the students, the children, quicker. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Also having the potable water or even just water tanks at all the shelters. So that, we can do things like that, such as the flushing of the toilets and everything else. It's tough. As you said before, this last hurricane, we had like 3,500 people go to the shelters. During Irma, we had over 40,000. The next hurricane, probably going to have over 60,000. So the shelters are a huge thing, plus having shelters that aren't schools. So eventually, you're not shutting down a school just to have a shelter. So as soon as possible. So all that has to, be part of the term there.
And I'll add one other thing to that. I mean, we need to have designated special needs shelters, and we need to improve upon that. That was certainly an issue that came up during the storm. Obviously, special needs are part of our community. They're part of the fabric of our community. But we need to obviously have places that they can go and be comfortable during the event. I'm going to assume that the first time we have an event that seems like it's going to come anywhere near the West Coast, that people are going to go, and we'll probably have record numbers at shelters this time for many reasons. One, you probably don't have a place to buckle down. And two, I can't even imagine the emotional and mental strain it put on you to go through what you went through. And I know that people aren't going to want to do that again. So we need to be prepared to accommodate those. And as we try to have them ready, I look at special needs as something that we definitely have a gap that we need to address.
Chair? If I may, Chairpersons, I think you're absolutely right. I think the amount of people that are going to be going to the shelters next time is going to be significantly larger. I'm a hotelier in this county. I opt to keep my properties open, but I've really got to look at that again. We always have. I've lived here since 1988. But with the magnitude of this storm, and it's not the day of the storm when you've got your guests in, it's when you lose all of your resources, your toilets, your water, your electricity. I think you're going to find properties that probably stayed open before are going to be looking at what is the best avenue. Is it worth us staying open? Because after that storm, it's very difficult to service all of those individuals. So I think that you are going to see quite an influx in the needs of shelters. And I think, we had a little bit of complacency over the last years, but after this storm, I think that people are going to be looking at things a lot differently. So it's what we need to prepare for immediately.
That's great.
Chair. I agree with, when you look at our county and the amount of the population that we have and the shelters that are available throughout the county, it's pretty clear we don't have enough. So I think it's important while we're moving forward through this process that if we have any particular type of obstruction, I'll give an example. I know the school district will be building a new school in Cape Coral because of the damage to the one up in the northern part of the city. You know, when these types of projects are moving forward, I think all of us, every municipality has to keep in our back of our mind, would that be able to be a shelter during the time of an emergency? And, you know, I know there's a lot of restrictions where those shelters can be and where they cannot be, but I think it would be prudent for all of us to keep that in the back of our mind with any type of a facility that we may be building or using these funds for, that also we could use them for a shelter. I know that's what we're going to do in the city. We have one shelter, over 200,000 population, and basically one shelter. So that's clearly not enough. When you look at the county as a whole, clearly we do not have enough shelters. And I agree with what Councilmember Holly Smith said, that I think you're going to see more people utilize those shelters. You know, when it comes to storm surge, we've never experienced that before. We've heard the threat many times, but it never came. So people, I think, became complacent. And I don't think you're going to see that again. I think this will be in the back of people's minds for years to come. So we have to make sure that we are prepared. We have a golden opportunity now. And I think we have to keep that in the back of our mind moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all. So the notes that I have is priorities in highlighting projects that are related to stormwater management, flooding, the septic to sewer conversions, potable water, and making sure that folks have water after a storm, and just in general hardening the system. With the shelter pieces and different initiatives and kind of a full look at what is needed to support shelters, ensure that they have the support through the event, but then also the plans for how to get schools back open, up and running after the event as quickly as possible. And then with a special focus on special needs shelters as well. And then location to ensure that the full population is supported. We'll take that.
Could I make just a comment?
Yes, sir.
I agree with everything that's been said. When I look at previous hurricane, one of the areas that's of really importance now going forward is where, if we have another hurricane, which hopefully we don't, but we'll have, the location where we can collect debris is becoming an issue, because in Estero, which Lee County used, we had 43 acres that are available. That's now going to be developed. So within the village of Estero, we really don't have anywhere to place debris. And so I think we need to look at, in a global sense, all throughout Lee County. It's very valuable for us to be able to have a place that's immediate to the damage, to deposit it and then later sort it through and get it to landfills or wherever it's going to go. So I think we need to look at collectively where those locations are and be prepared to say, we can immediately start cleaning the areas up. So those areas, somebody owns them and they want to develop them. We may have to have some dollars that we help defray those development and keep them for debris fields.
Yes, sir.
If I may add to that, then what you also have to look at is, who's your contracted service that you're using, whether it's, that we all have, many of us have different contractors. So is there an allowance for everyone, probably have an interlocal agreement on some of those debris removal sites? Now, the city of Sanibel, we have two separate contractors, and we have separate allowances depending on where the site is. Some have to haul off, and we already had a pre-position contract with others. So that's something that we would need to consider as well, as how we can use those together. I think right now we take some of them, like the route to Charlotte County. A lot of it heads up to Charlotte County. We do have some on our island, but that's only for one of our contracted haulers.
Okay. So debris management sites, the plans and updating debris management plans and reflection of new development and lessons learned from the event.
And I would also just mention that another part of this is just the resiliency of the individual houses, the hazard mitigation grants and supporting those grants to get people to lift their houses. because, if they get their houses lifted, then they can get back in their house faster, and that reduces the demands of shelters over the long term.
One of the basic needs is for a hardened communication system. We all experienced after the hurricane the inability to make cell phone calls, to access the internet, and so forth. And that's a real life safety issue. If someone is injured or has a heart attack in their homes, and since the last data I have is that there are only about 400,000 landlines, residential landlines left in the whole state of Florida. Everybody's using a cell phone. It's basically a radio system, but we need to have cell towers hardened in order that we can get emergency vehicles to where they need to go, that we can rescue people, that we can assist those who are in dire straits with their health, that we can get people out of homes that are not mobile. So I think we need to harden that communication system some way, shape, or form, working with the cell tower providers or whatever. That's something we need to focus on.
List of projects that are related to hardening and expanding communication systems. All right, excellent. Yes, sir.
I would also add to that Starlinks.
Mhm.
Lee helped receive 35 Starlinks that we were able to use in the community for our communication, which was critical to our time.
It's funny you say that because I was writing it down when you said it, and because our city used that as well, and it was it was a great device to have internet service immediately, and we deployed them throughout the city. Most of them at our fire stations or at City Hall. So that's something that proved to be extremely essential when all other services were down.
All right. So did you have anything else to add? Oh,
My other
ma'am.
comment adding on to that is we found out much later about the Starlink, and I think there was an availability of those, and that we weren't aware of. And I think once the message got out, people started using those. And actually, I bought one myself and I'm continuing to use that because it really was the best way for us to get emergency communication.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just add, we, at DEO, we actually worked with DMS Secretary Pedro Allende and Chief Information Officer Jamie Grant on getting, actually, members of my team, we deployed them on overnight missions to get the Starlinks. We had them pre-staged at different locations and then helped surge them into the community. So I'm sure that Department of Management Services would be happy to, I'll make note to have them speak to you about just different ideas and thoughts they have on ways that could be ready for a future event or other ideas. I know they have a lot more experience there, Jamie and Pedro. So I'll make sure that they're aware.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all. So I'm going to provide you a brief update on terms of the branch progress. This is going to be leading into a question that we have for you all. The branches are having a lot of ideas in terms of different initiatives that they think would be very beneficial, types of projects, but we want to make sure it's within the actionable solutions, that it is something that can be implemented, that it's within what you all can see your jurisdiction supporting and being able to do. So this is leading to a question of what are we willing to do for resiliency? What type of policy changes, zoning changes, density changes to policy? What are jurisdictions willing to do in terms of, in the name of resiliency? So we want to provide guidance to the branches if they're going down a path that is not actionable, that we then can focus their attention on an area that we will be able to implement going forward. So this is providing a brief on what has been discussed thus far, but then it will lead into that open discussion with you all of what are we willing to do for resiliency. Overall, we have many of the branches discussing building codes and zoning policy changes, that looking at countywide, what are best practices within the municipalities and the county as a whole, of what can be done to streamline, what can be done to ensure that all jurisdictions are have in policy what will be the most resilient going forward, and what will be incentives for developers to continue to invest in this area. They are focused on what can be done to promote attainable housing and maintaining the character of the community and not causing a significant change of what it means to be within Lee County. But what looking at building codes, policies, zoning policies can be done to make these changes. Hardening critical infrastructure has been a very common topic amongst the different branches, looking specifically at very similar to the themes that we've been discussing today of water, power, transportation, communication. Shelters has been a continuous discussion, specifically special needs, what would be needed for healthcare providers to continue service, and then sanitary infrastructure systems. So looking at what is upgrading, what would be necessary to upgrade current infrastructure to either current code or beyond current code in order to achieve optimal resiliency for the potential future event. Livability has been a discussion within multiple branches of improving transportation, in addition to looking at multiple sources in terms of public transit, having folks live where they're working, increasing density in certain areas so that attainable housing can be built where the work centers are, and then they have the commercial access to the commercial centers, and commutes are reduced from an hour to ideally that they would be able to bike or walk or something along those lines on days it's not 110 degrees. But have that shorter commute than what is currently being experienced. It's also looking in multiple sectors or multiple branches of continuing to use tourism as an economic driver, how to promote the tourism industry, how to look at what is needed to continue to promote that, what are ways that the cultural resources and the art community and other stakeholders within the culture of Lee County can be utilized as resources to grow that identity of Lee County, encourage tourism to come to Lee County as an economic growth area. There's a lot of discussion with regards to what are the areas that recruiting to Lee County, that where you want to grow, what kind of industries that you'd like to grow to bounce back or to continue that growth within Lee County. And what are the hindrances of that? Honestly, housing, as all of us know, continues to be the leading reason why different branch members are saying we can't grow because there's not enough attainable housing. It's been a common theme, but looking at across the board what can be done to encourage growth in specific sectors. This has been a very common theme of within the town halls of mental health. It is actually one of the emergent issues that we'll talk to you in just a little bit of the strain that not only the hurricane itself, but the recovery from the hurricane, the mental health concerns for the general community, that strain is definitely taking a toll. In addition to that, the infrastructure, the actual buildings that were the service providers for mental health healthcare have been catastrophically damaged, reducing the capacity to respond to now that growing need for mental health provisions. So what can be done with these cascading of these continuing events, COVID, now Hurricane Ian, to support the damaged infrastructure of mental health support? What can be done in not just necessarily direct healthcare provision, but also what are natural spaces or cultural events or community events that can be done to bring people together and have a space that they can think of other than Hurricane Ian or what they're experiencing potentially at home in their individual recovery, that is also a discussion that is occurring in multiple branches. What we're doing with the branches is looking at all of your different community plans. We thus far have reviewed 30 community plans, either drafted by the county or municipalities or different regional stakeholders, and identifying projects that were in discussion prior to the event, presenting these to the branches so that they can incorporate it into their plans. But we would like from you, and within the emails that we'll be sending to you all, some of the key findings within that research, but it very much mirrors a lot of the discussions that we've been having thus far. But ensure that we have them at operating within a direction that you would like to keep them running. I'll defer to Chair Ruane to facilitate this conversation, but what are we willing to do for resiliency? So.
So obviously we have some challenges in front of us. We have this award letter we're waiting for, which brings us a conversation with workforce housing. The other conversation that it'll come to is obviously for workforce housing, we all have provisions within our land development code to allow obviously to become more dense when it comes to that situation. When I was on the city council in Sanibel after Hurricane Charlie, there was a build back ordinance and obviously raised height. And that conversation, we have certainly asked staff to look at the land development code within unincorporated areas to see if there's any deficiencies or were there any storm surges that obviously put us in a situation where we might need to consider height. That's something that is at least a discussion worthwhile, because as much as we really enjoy the West Coast and what we have to offer, in the same token, it's difficult to imagine where there might be places within Lee County that had significant storm surges, or if the storm surge shifted in a particular area where you might have got 5 foot of storm surge instead of 10 feet. The concerns you're going to have is, will people actually develop property? Will they actually redevelop their property? It's a discussion that we're going to have, certainly when it comes to HUD and workforce housing. I actually think it's at least a discussion we're going to explore within Lee County if we have adequate height, considering the storm surges we took place here, and whether height might be a conversation, and I use this word conversation, that we need to have. It's something that we hold near and dear to our, and I'm not talking about skyscrapers, but the same token, another 6 or 8 feet might give some areas greater protection. It also might enable people to actually tear down a house and actually rebuild a house, with the first floor really being more garage orientated and not really having anything other than that. But we're going to have to go through this conversation relative to the HUD conversation. Places like Fort Myers Beach, you have some restrictions. Sanibel, when I was there, we had community housing, and we certainly looked at, but within all of the land development codes, we have the opportunity at least to look at housing in a particular way. The interesting thing, when we were looking at the land development code, even in Captiva, there's different heights that are grandfathered in different locations. So you have irregularities or things that are not in conformity in those regard. And when you look at some of those properties, they might have fared better than others. So the ones that actually were a little bit higher. So I certainly, at least it's one person's opinion, but the discussion, I certainly would like to see people do within their community, and see if that is something that you feel comfortable about, that you may or may not be open at least to a conversation.
I'll just interject there. I think I'm already on. Yeah. So as far as height goes, we measure our height from BFE. So we don't want to discourage people from lifting anything. But as far as working with the land development code, I was talking to Tanya about this. There's a couple of things that are probably a little bit beyond our bandwidth at this time, but if the county or this group would come up with like a model ordinance, if you will, maybe a specific workforce housing zoning area, so that if a project is just for workforce housing, then it comes with certain densities and height bonuses that are allowed. Another thing that's a little more complicated is lean urbanism, which is in a place like Fort Myers Beach, where we have a lot of small commercial landowners. The idea of lean urbanism is that you develop a template which includes incentives and bonuses built into it. So maybe someone has a workforce housing, they get additional height. All that's built into a template, so that if a small landholder wants to redevelop his commercial property, he doesn't necessarily have to go and get a planner and an attorney and go through a lengthy variance process. These have already been pre-vetted and pre-prepared, and they can use those to develop something that is based on our encouragement with what we put in that incentive and put in those templates. And that's something that's complicated. And it's a little, like I said, it's a little beyond our bandwidth at this time. We were working on it before when we thought we had lots of time for commercial property to be developed. But now they're all being redeveloped because all the commercial properties were wiped out during the storm.
Great points. I mean, the challenge obviously is that we're all unique communities within the county. Sanibel by far has the most unique Sanibel plan, and certainly want to have a conversation. I'm not saying that we could come up with a template, because I don't know that the template we came, it may work for Fort Myers Beach, but I don't want it to necessarily feel compelled that it may have to work for Cape Coral or for Sanibel. I just want to have discussions about this, because as we get this award, we'll start to have a conversation that'll touch on density. And as we're touching on density, I just wanted to try to open the conversation up as if within your city, within your silo, are you comfortable based on what you experience from this event that we're okay, and there's not going to be any need to change the land development code whatsoever. I know we're doing that within the county. We have great staff to help us through that process. And there is inconsistencies in some of the unincorporated areas. And there are grandfather, where some might be higher, and we're doing our due diligence to look at the areas that had higher height within that area, how they perform relative to other areas that may not have had the same height. It's a conversation, and we're all unique. Each one of the cities have incorporated for your own makeup of what your city is going to be. And by no means am we going to try to do something. We can come up with suggestions, but the template that we might put together may not necessarily work for Fort Myers. It may not work for Sanibel. It may not work for Cape Coral, but I think it's worthy of a discussion and starting to say, here's some of the alternative or options, we could at least have a conversation about. And I think the beauty of having someone like Hagerty and Collaboratory is the information that we want to look at, we can. We very early as county commissioners asked our staff to look at the land development code. We asked for what type of issues did we see. We asked for what inconsistencies. We asked to look at what transpired in the storm, and where we had certain storm surge events, what would have happened if we had this or that. We want to see those types of things. Now that we have actual data, let's roll it out and see where we are. The other issue that we're going to have to deal with, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, is that we're going to have a challenge, and the Secretary and I were talking about this today, is insurance. And we were in, really fortunate to work in the city of Sanibel and work with the League of Cities, but they predominantly offered insurance throughout this community for any city that wanted to be a participant. But they had X dollars that they would keep in retention, and the rest of it was all reinsured. I don't know that the state is built that way, and I don't know that it uses reinsurance to the degree that I saw, at least as the chair of the insurance trust. So, we not only have a responsibility to look at what we can offer, but we're also going to have a responsibility to see what role can we play, what role can we actually be involved in to give the insurance company the opportunity to feel like we've done something to mitigate their potential loss in the future. And that's a key thing that I think we're going to find. A lot of these cash transactions that have taken place, I've heard after the fact that they didn't really look for insurance, but it was cash. When you have, a mortgage, you go to the bank, they're looking for your flood policy, they're looking for your wind policy. When you do a cash transaction, it's not a provision, you quickly move and you buy something and then you try to go out and place insurance. And I certainly know of many people that have had challenges trying to find basic wind insurance, or they've gotten wind insurance and it's gone up 300 and 400%. And the only carrier that's writing them is Lloyd's. Part of the issue with any insurance company having come from that industry is they want to make sure the event's not going to occur again. And what, if anything, have you made yourself be more attractive where I want to insure you again? So it's an interesting dichotomy we're faced with. It's something we're going to need to talk about. And I want everyone to feel most comfortable in your own silo, but it's a conversation we're going to have. And it's a conversation I think we're better off talking out loud together to see what options, do research, and try to find out what opportunities may be available to us. And then a discussion takes place, and we at least have data that we're making decisions off of. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, in regards to density, as I spoke to the last meeting, the only increase that Sanibel's allows in density is for workforce for low market rate housing. So we already have that modified. So if there was a parcel that a workforce housing company, we have CHR on the island, but that's not on it, but there has to be. If they came and found a plot of land and was doing it for specifically workforce housing, which is going to be really important with this grant opportunity, then we already have that codified. That is the one area that you can increase density. I know in other areas, they might be looking at ADUs, the additional dwelling units, for their properties for workforce housing or attainable housing. In 2016, we kind of moved forward thinking when we thought as a planning commission then, and it was like, what if the big one hits? You want to prepare for it, but you hope it never comes. And we did a build back provision that allowed you to build in the same footprint. And that's even forward of the coastal construction control line. If it was built there, you could rebuild there. So we had that in place, so that did allow people that own those properties to know that if they were destroyed by an act of nature, that they could rebuild and not have to rebuild to the current zoning, which would have not allowed what they have on there. So they were protected. And what we've done since the hurricane is also try to give some sort of an incentive. Yes, you can build there, but maybe you want to come back from that coastal construction control line because we know it's not as safe or smart to be right close to that beach line. So we're trying to give other incentives to say, let's work within. You can still get your same density. We're working right now on, increasing the ceiling height. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but to increase the ceiling height from 8 feet, which might have been the standard in 1974, to 9 feet, which would be better now for a property, a multifamily property or a condo or a hotel that's gone. That's a different type of unit that they have. So we're still allowing the density. In terms of height, we're staying within our envelope, but we're saying, certainly I think any of us, certainly on the outer island, we want to see you elevate your home. We want to see these businesses elevate. And many of them are being torn down and they are elevating. Speaking to insurance, I'm surprised we've only had so far at the city of Sanibel 148 demo permits. You would think that we would have a lot more, but unfortunately, it's the financial constraint. We have an average population of 68. We've got families. These are homes that might have been in the families. You could buy a house, 5 years ago for under $400,000 on Sanibel. You can't touch that now. But those people are financially challenged to raise and elevate because the cost of doing that is so substantial. And speaking to the insurance, I think we're going to have a lot more cash buyers on the island that might not need to reinsure. And that's a little scary for us as well because is that going to change the culture? So, a lot of things that we're thinking about with the rebuild. As far as height, respectfully, of course, everybody's different in Sanibel is, and we know what our value is out there. We're trying to look at how we can give relief in the best way we can, but also stay true to our Sanibel plan. But the density aspect for workforce housing is a great relief, and we hope that that's going to be taken advantage of. And also with mixed use, we're even looking at if you were developing a commercial complex, we have a real restriction that you couldn't have an additional unit for workforce housing or below market rate. And we're looking at that right now to say, how can we mix that in? Because we know we want people to live and work on that island if they choose to. So how can we incentivize that? And those are things that we are looking at proactively right now.
Great points, to say the least. I know of 3 different conversations I've had with new people here, second homeowners within the city of Sanibel, and they're not as aware as you or I might be, having governed there. They're not aware of what their actions are. It's not their primary home, so they're stuck not knowing. We have an area that turns over very quickly. We have a community that turns over, and certainly knowing the makeup of Sanibel, having governed there for as long as I did, there's an awful lot of people at their second homes. So I'm going to guess that some of their issues may not necessarily be financial restraints. There may not be the same urgency. They may be thinking that they're going to get in front of people where it's their main home. There's only so many contractors that are available. There's different things that I've had conversations, because as you're out in the community and you're talking to people in the community, I've run into more second homeowners and people that are looking this as second homeowners. And although you might have the cash to buy a particular property, you still want to look at insurance and see that you can potentially have insurance. Listen, it's a great feeling when you have a mortgage that's paid off. But personally, whether I had a mortgage or not, I wouldn't forego insurance. Maybe it's just because I came from the industry, but I'm going to think that the reason for maybe not having more demo permits are honestly the newness to the area, the uncertainty of the rules, and the clarity. So if nothing else, this group again will do our education. I like the whole town hall concept, because if you're here for a couple of years, listen, I can talk about Build Back. Certainly you can, Holly, with all the experience you had on the planning commission, but the average person that walks in here in 2019 wouldn't know what to do. And they're going to obviously become engaged, and it may not have been their priority. I'm amazed at the number of people that have reached out to us in unincorporated Lee County that just came down here and were calling up and saying, what do you mean I can't put my waste out? I didn't go to my property. I'm taking obviously building material you picked up, and you can't pick up mine? Why? I said, well, we had it open for, 7 months, plus 6+ months, and that was available. I know, but I didn't come down here. So we do have a lot of people where this is their second home. And I think we're going to find, as we go through this process, you'll find many people that are unclear of what we can or can't do. And I think you'll find many people that will obviously get around to doing it, since it's not primary, residency. And if they didn't come down here for this season, you call up a contractor and they say, okay, we can do a tear down, but it's a 2-year rebuild. We all recognize the fact that our labor force is stretched, supplies are stretched, and people are shocked with the price. And I think price has been an impediment, because when you get to a per square foot, people are waiting for that correction to take place, or people are waiting for interest rates maybe to drop because the Fed has raised interest rates as quickly. So I think there's a lot of other factors that are out there that are being impediments to people rebuilding. And I'm, for nothing else, glad we're a task force and we could educate the community. And I hope at these town hall meetings, they come out and, as Tanya had indicated, it's amazing some of the questions that come up. They may be something they text and it gets up on a board, or it's just a conversation you have. But I'm surprised how many people have called me up and asked to pick up their building debris material. And it's long past the date's been closed, and the state was certainly extremely helpful in areas that we never realized before. And then secondarily, the conversations of, the unclarity on what they can or can't do. And that is really our responsibility to try to educate the people as much as we can. It's difficult that some people weren't as responsive to feel the need to come down, or maybe it was just overwhelming, didn't know what to do with the property. But these things, I think, are going to come out in the town hall meetings. I think we're going to have those conversations. And yes, Sanibel, had the benefit of having community housing, had the benefit of having a build back situation, having those things. But us as a community, we need to make sure that we do this and we offer solutions to our residents, our second homeowners that we rely on a great deal. And I think they may not necessarily understand the rules. Having owned a second home in many communities, I would never say I know the rules there nearly as well as I do where I'm homesteaded. Just something that I think will bring a conversation.
And I do think along those lines, I know in my area, that the hazard mitigation grant is enough, where there's a lot of people who maybe could not afford to rebuild their house raised up to the proper elevation, but with the hazard mitigation grant, they may cross that line and be able to stay. So it's very important for our sense of community. And like you said, to get people, to encourage people, maybe if they're not quite sure if they want to lift their house up or not, it may give the incentive to do that. And then all these homes become more resilient.
All right, excellent. Thank you. In terms of next month's, so kind of spoken at a high level of, and thank you, Councilwoman Smith, in terms of some of the specific conversations that are happening in Sanibel pertaining to density and height, having the opportunity to kind of go back to knowing that these decisions aren't made in a silo, in conversation with your fellow elected officials and your municipal and county staff of what are you looking for going forward, looking at the agenda for next month in terms of resiliency, maybe going into a little bit more detail. Are there other topics to give our branches parameters in terms of what types of projects and initiatives to look at outside of density, code and regulatory for elevations and setback requirements? Are there any other areas that you all would like to talk to your counterparts back in your jurisdiction or special district, and then be able to report back next month on what are the parameters you like to set for the branches?
Can I add one more thing? I think it's important, obviously, for us to think this way, but I'd love to have people feel free to email Tanya after our town hall meetings take place. I think we'll learn an awful lot as we have the engagement with communities. I think not only will people go to town hall meetings, but then they'll tell their friends, and that's where the conversations will come up. So I'm also just trying to make sure we have the flexibility and you have the opportunity, not today to have that solution or direction, to go through the town hall meeting, to go through that, and maybe, understand that the agenda is going to come out a week, 10 days before the agenda comes out. We'll be beyond our town hall meetings. You'll get some reasonable input. There might be something that you hear that might make sense. I'd love that opportunity and give you all that opportunity. I think it's important. I wish all the town hall meetings were behind us, because then we could look at what conversations took place at 16 different town hall meetings. That's to make up our community. But that's just a suggestion.
We can do that. All right. So we will continue to provide you information. We'll submit the first analysis of the responses from the town halls to you all and some of our questions in terms of for the agenda for next month, and kind of going a little bit more into the meat of what parameters we should be setting for the branches. And we look forward to your input throughout the next month. Yes, sir.
I would like to note that today is the 7-month anniversary of Hurricane Ian. And we talked about mental health issues and stress upon people and so forth. But there are a lot of our residents in Lee County that are still fighting to get their flood claims paid and their roofs repaired. And we're not that far away from the next hurricane season. And I would encourage Tallahassee to at least, I know that the insurance department collects data on the number of claims that have been filed, number of claims that have been closed, number of claims that are in process and so forth. But if we're going to reduce the stress on people, whether it's the families, the adults in the family or the kids in the families that have been dealing with the pandemic, have been dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, we have simply got to speed up the process of closing claims, getting people money in their pockets to do the necessary repairs. I mean, people can't even contract for services to repair their homes. They have open walls, they have roofs that haven't been repaired. And, you know, we're not that far away from our rainy season. Rainy season may start a little earlier this year from what I've read. So I would encourage trying to do what we can in order to speed up that process at the state level. The state gets the information. The state can monitor what's going on with the various insurance companies. You know, I think what differentiates Lee County from what happened in Panama City and Mexico Beach is we're very much more, we have much more population. Tanya was telling me this morning that the population of Mexico Beach itself was about 1,000 people. Well, you look at the 700,000 people in Lee County, and you think of the impact of the damage in terms of the number of adjusters needed, the number of assignments that the adjusters have, the backlog in paperwork that gets created with respect to filing of insurance claims. And people, you know, people I know are just at their wits' end. They're still living in recreational vehicles. They're still living at hotels. They simply cannot get the funds they need to start the restoration process. So I would just encourage a message going back that we need to, you know, one gentleman here was talking about somebody from the insurance department showed up. They had like an insurance company workshop, I think you called it.
Yeah.
The regulator was there. Guess what? People came in with claims, checks were written. You know, if the parents are in the rooms, the kids tend to behave. Well, maybe we need more of that. So just encourage it.
Yeah, well, that was Fort Myers Beach had an insurance village. I think there were others too. And they had the insurance regulator was there at the door. And I talked to two constituents who came in with a problem and walked out with a check. So it was a very effective mechanism for getting some things resolved.
I actually saw our chief financial officer, Jimmy Petronis, in Broward County last week. We were there. We've partnered to a significant extent on the insurance villages, and we co-located with them when we were on the ground following the months of the storm. But this is certainly a topic that's top of mind for all of our leadership. I know that we have a new OIR commissioner, Commissioner Yaroski. So this is something that has everyone's full attention. So when I go, part of the intent of being here today is truly just to listen, to fact find, to make sure we keep a line of sight of the challenges that are still being felt locally. So I will certainly bring that back to my leadership. And I know the legislature is winding down in their final weeks of session as well. They've been working incredibly hard. So I'll be sure to convey some of these points back to my leadership. And as you said, hurricane season starts June 1. Hard to believe, but we're getting ready, and we'll keep a light of sight on all these things and what we can do to motivate and expedite to the extent possible. Did also want to mention, because I was remiss earlier, I would like to thank Representative Botana. He's been very helpful over the past couple of months in helping us with the local government emergency bridge loan. Senator Martin, Senator Albritton, and also Representative Gio Lombardo. So there's a whole contingent of folks. We're really challenging ourselves at DEO, not just at DEO, but with all of the partners to, even if it's not in my agency silo, what can we do to help break those silos down and come up with a more dynamic solution and be a bit more forward-looking?
I'd just like to finalize my comment by saying one of the things that has to be recognized is if you look at the housing stock in Lee County this year going into this hurricane season, it's been degraded from the housing stock that was here last year, this time going into hurricane season. What, Ian? There's a lot of unrepaired homes. There's a lot of homes that still have roof damage and so forth. And if we get a heavy heavy rainy season, if we get another hurricane, we could see the same level of disaster as we saw last year because the housing stock has been damaged. So please tell them to keep that in mind.
I certainly will, and this is something, Mr. Chair, I'll probably want to stay in touch with you on over the coming months. We closely partner also with the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. My former colleague, Mike DiNapoli, is actually now the executive director. He has a extensive background in finance and state government. So, and I know they just got historic funding through legislation also championed by Senate President Pasadomo for affordable and workforce housing. And we do have a few housing programs at DEO as well. And again, you'll have your own state action plan here in Lee County, but certainly want to do anything we can to support in housing repair and replacement program efforts. Mhm.
Yeah, I just for our next meeting, it might be helpful. I know that there's been 4 workshops. I think you touched on some of the main themes, but maybe if you could get an email out to us saying what was the specific needs in those locations. So, and what my intention is before our next meeting is bring probably one person from each panel, from each of the branches together in a meeting, locally to look at what our unmet needs are and then look at the greater Lee County to try to tie those in preparation for our next meeting. So I'll give feedback on that and I'll provide feedback on the meeting on Monday night that we're holding.
Great, I appreciate that. I would be remiss, I should have brought this up earlier from a housekeeping point of view. I will not be here next month. Many months ago, I planned a European trip for our anniversary, so I won't be here. So I was going to ask Matt Caldwell, since you're part of the county, if you'd be willing to chair next month's meeting. Everybody okay with that? Yes. Thank you. Just wanted to take care of that. I should have did that the early part of the meeting. I apologize.
Okay, thank you for a terrific conversation. One more topic here. We are still in the information gathering stage of this work. As the branches move forward, we have the town halls that are, most of those are still in front of us. But right on the heels of that, we'll be moving into what we're calling these workshops that are topical, bringing together subject matter experts and other resources here to do a deep dive. At your places, you've got a listing of the types of topics that are emerging here. I think, Holly, it's a great idea about bringing a representative of each of the branches there to share firsthand what they're looking at to go deeper here. We've really heard the issues of fragmentation, the entanglements, the issues that Tanya went through, showing how many branches are implicated for different topics here. So these are the areas like a infrastructure workshop could be that water systems. Who are all of the agencies, all of the experts who need to come together and work their way through what would be a more comprehensive water system framework that would be more resilient and enable each entity to do what they do best and connect together to harden these. So provide a few minutes for topics for workshops that we need to be aware of and think about planning. Any experts that are your go-to person that say, we really need to hear from this person or this research or data center.
For disclosure, I'm also on the infrastructure branch group, and I'm here for Rob DeLallo. But I think each of the municipalities that has somebody in their water system should bring that person forward, because that's one of our top priorities as we talk about infrastructure, is getting all those subject matter experts together to discuss how that new system or redundant system would look.
Thank you.
Are these looking to be, do we know when these workshops are taking place? If there's an email that you want us to send out, so we know who can solicit back, maybe not at this table right now, but also give some thought on exactly what you're looking for, so we can make sure the appropriate people are coming, and also how that workshop will be taken, when and where it will be taking place.
Yeah, great job anticipating the next step from this initial conversation. No, it's perfect. These will be a little more rolling as the need and opportunity comes forward. Really, basically looking kind of mid-May through June, still in that information gathering window. But we'll have to pivot from these pretty quickly into the action planning of the branches. We can always add additional ones as we go forward. I see Sandy Stillwell there, who leads the planning and capacity branch, and I know that they've got a lot of interest in gaining expertise around the master planning components, which are eligible for the CDBG-DR funding to help specific communities that are identified. But think about that. We will start to build out a rolling calendar of workshops as they become identified, and you'll have an opportunity to both inform your constituents and identify participants who could contribute. Okay, well, we don't need to dwell on that because we continue to keep a record of the topics. And as you said, you've got a working draft of what the sort of topics are that seem in common throughout. Dave.
So with regards to these subject matter experts, the testimony you're looking for from them is going to be at these workshops?
Correct.
Okay. It would be really helpful if we could somehow alert the members here or the community that this particular expert's going to be at that particular workshop. So
Great. Yeah.
if we had a heads up on that, that would be great.
Yeah, you can count on that. It's we kind of had a trial run with the Natural Resources branch up at Captiva last Friday, and they had some experts there already sharing information. It was a branch meeting, not a workshop. The distinction being making it more widely available and promoted so more people could attend.
Thank you.
All right, we want to provide you guys an update in terms of some of the emergent issues that have been discussed with regards to that the branches have brought to the table. I will provide an update on the previous emergent issues that we have discussed. So with regards to permitting, specifically the housing branch, but it has been discussed in a couple other branches, they have requested that they, for additional data and information, there's a perceived backlog in terms of the processing of permits, which is understandable completely in a post-disaster environment. So they have requested that this become an emergent issue as it is something that is impacting right now. It will inform the long-term recovery plan and potential policy recommendations, but they have asked for data to be collected from the county and the municipalities with regards to the number of permits being processed and processing times for the different types of permits, whether it be related to the hurricane or not related to the hurricane, so that there is a single repository of information for them to look at. So that has been a request that has come in. If this is something that would be you're okay with moving forward, the recovery support team would then work with the municipalities and the county to collect this data and be able to then present back to you all and just kind of giving a snapshot in time that across the board, what does this look like? So we would then coordinate. We've been collecting some data and just give you some points of reference that there definitely has been an uptick that with at least the county alone, if you compare March of this year versus March of last year, March of this year, there was 10,000 plus permits that were issued, and March of last year, there was 4,800 permits issued. So the goal of this exercise is just to get a full snapshot of what it looks like in the county in terms of a permitting process. Is there any issue with us going forward and collecting, or is there any other data points that you would like to have collected as part of this effort?
I will, I received the data that I'll provide to you. I got it about 11:30 last night from some of our staff that it'll give a whole breakdown that might be helpful to you as well to see how we are breaking down. since
Perfect.
We have critical impact out on the island. How often would you like that data? Because we can submit it weekly. I mean, we get daily updates
Well,
as well. So what would you like to see coming forward? And I'll forward you this email right now that can go out to the task force.
the request from the housing branch was just a snapshot in time right now. Would it be helpful for you all to have it be a reoccurring item? Yes. Okay. And on what interval? Monthly? Is that, or every 2 weeks? Monthly?
Yep.
Okay. Sounds
And then
good.
would you like an addition, like, how does that compare to last year in your municipality or county? Because I think that's probably extremely pertinent as well.
Yes.
We're up to about 40 since the hurricane, since we could start taking permits, about 4,300. And usually we have about 2,000 on an annual basis. So, and we're processing them very well at this point.
All right. Excellent.
Yes.
Just since we're talking about permitting, I want to bring up an issue that we're having in Cape Coral that we've been working on. And I don't know if the other municipalities are having the same type of problem regarding the notice of commencements. The director at FDM issued an executive order regarding notice of commencements to help get the permits processed. And one of the problems that we are having in Cape Coral under Florida Statute 713-135 is the issuing authority. So it would be the city shall verify the name and address of the owner, the name of the contract, the location of the address and the property to be improved. Our staff and our attorneys have worked with the staff at FDEM to try to get that executive order broadened a little bit where the municipalities do not have to verify the information. I know for the city of Cape Coral, we go to the county, we get a certified copy from the county, or the contractor does, and brings it as far as the permitting package when they submit for a permit. So what we're asking is that alone would be the verification that we need. How it is impacting our city, we have about 3,500 permits today that we are still verifying the notice of commencements before we can issue the permits. You know, we have had, what we have done is had some of our permits like roofing, where there are push button permits that you can get online. And unfortunately, you can't call an inspection then until the NOC has been approved. So it's a problem we're having. We have 2 dedicated staff members just trying to keep up with the NOC process. So if we can broaden that executive order a little bit, my understanding, our staff and our attorneys have come up with an agreement. Actually, I had texted the director FDEM this morning. I guess he's on the ground because of the hurricane or the tornadoes. So hopefully I'll be able to talk to him a little more on Monday with this. But hopefully if we could broaden that executive order, I think it'll help a lot of our municipalities be able to get these permits issued much quicker, at least for the inspection component, because you don't need the NOC approved before the permit's issued, but before the first inspection, you have to. So something we're working on. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. We will work on that for you all. Another emergent issue has come from 2 branches with regards to mental health care capacity within Lee County. That Salis Care was significantly impacted as one of the main providers for mental health support within the community, and including multiple of their buildings that were the primary infrastructure for this. We did reach out to Salis Care and and they're going through the same public assistance process that many of you are going through currently for your infrastructure damages, which we all know is a very long process. With that, they're still starting construction. However, there is not a specific timeline that has been released in terms of all their facilities, just to know the unknown funding timeline factor. With that, the branches were looking at what are the potential other immediate options that because the capacity of Lee Health, Park Royal Hospital, David Lawrence Center in Collier, they have been stepping up to support this need. But increasingly, as the stress of the recovery happens, similarly, we saw this in Michael afterwards. It continues on for at least 1 to 2 years after the event in this need. So we are going to convey this information back to the branch in terms of the timeline that Salis Care has put forward. Is there any other research that you would like to be done related to this emergent issue outside of the information that we have been able to collect thus far?
I will say at Lee Health, we have a bed capacity issue with regards to our Baker Act folks because Salis Care is inoperable at this time. And we're transporting folks as far as Gainesville, Florida for access. So I think as we talk about, how to harden our area, we also have to look at what kind of facilities we can build here locally to, address this for the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, it's going to be a 2-year process probably.
So with actually very similar, almost identical problem after Hurricane Michael, the Salis Care of Bay County is called CARES. They had catastrophic impact to their facilities, and similarly, and they were having a mental health crisis. I remember the shocking statistic in Bay County was that on average, 2 children were Baker Act a day for the first year after Hurricane Michael, just due to the stress and impact to the community. And there was no local capacity. Different options that the area was looking at, and it required partnerships. Just CARES didn't have that capacity to do a temporary facility. But do you believe that there is potential opportunities for partnership with entities that maybe have more capacity and partnership to do temporary facilities, which is eligible under Category B under FEMA public assistance to kind of fill that gap? Is that a potential option? Maybe.
I would love to see that as an option. Yeah.
I can put together a case study and
Yeah.
with some things, and then we
Thank
can
you.
provide that. Okay.
We'll also go through we'll also go through the options that we have available for the county and how stretched we are as resources in that area, because obviously it's something that collectively we need to understand, what is the need and how stretched our capacity is. Try to identify what's missing.
Sounds good. So an update from previous identified issues. We were on the path to write a letter on behalf of the task force for you to ratify. However, SBA actually reached out to us and asked if they can participate. So we're in the process of scheduling a meeting with the SBA Public Affairs representative and identifying what are potential resources that they can bring to bear and try to remedy the situation that we're hearing again in all the town halls, that folks are having difficulties receiving the economic injury and home loans available through that program. So our original due out for today was the letter. We are going to kind of pivot in terms of this recent update that SBA has reached out prior to the letter being sent, and we will provide an up to you as soon as that meeting occurs, where we are asking them to outline what resources can be brought to bear to help remedy the situation.
Question?
Yes, sir.
I've been in this silo for 30 plus years. I guess the only question I would have, and I know that PPP was totally different, bringing in different providers, and I know that had its challenges, but SBA, and to be an SBA provider, you actually go through a rigorous background check, you go through a lot of different steps. I would just strongly recommend that they use the providers that are SBA trained, SBA available. We need to open the bandwidth. When you look at the approvals to funded, it is significant. And if you have banks like JP Morgan, banks like Bank of America that have done SBAs for the last 25 years, if we looking for capacity, I don't understand why people that have been in that silo for years, because I could tell you, understand that it's something I've dealt with for 30 years, and the experts in those areas could help bring resources and labor to someone that understands how to process an SBA, what the requirements are. But what we need is stimuli back in this economy. And the sooner we do that, the sooner we all benefit as a collective body in Lee County. And that's just something, I mean, I understand the whole PPP conversation that took place, and Tanya, you and I talked about that, but I would just strongly encourage them to use the bandwidth they currently have by the providers that have been set up for years, have them assist them in processing what is approved loans to get them funded.
Yes, sir. We'll include that in the questions that we present to them. The other question, merchant issue that we're still tracking is claiming disaster loss on tax returns. That the Hurricane Tax Relief Act was introduced to the Senate on March 9th of this year and has been referred to the Committee on Finance. So it is currently navigating its way through Washington, D.C. for approval. All right, looking at the time, we are going to send this to you guys all in an email in terms of community master plans. We'll be just looking for criteria, and this will be part of our, we'll add this to the agenda to next month of looking at community master plans. What are potential criteria that you would like the planning and capacity branch to look at in selecting what communities they would recommend a community master plan be developed for. So please, we'll send that email to you all for your input and then for add it to the agenda for next month.
Very good. So just a reminder, 2 follow-ups here is continue to promote the participation at the town halls. We have 12 coming up starting Monday at Sanibel Big Arts. And throughout the next 2 weeks, they'll be active. You don't have to live in an area to go to one of these. They are county-wide, and where you work may be where the closest one is for that evening. And then also a reminder about the projects and the form that you can use to submit your projects for the CDBG-DR process there as we continue to prepare for the notice of that funding. With that, let me turn it back to Tanya to close us out.
All right, our next meeting is May 26th. And with that, oh, sorry.
Yes, I had been looking at the meeting schedule, so I'm actually president of the Horizon Foundation. Our Horizon Council meets on several of the Fridays. I had to rush to get here and make the choices, but we also have several of our branch members and some of the branch leaders that are part of that. So for the June 23rd, the August 25th, and October 27th meeting, I was just going to ask if possibly there can be maybe we could start at 9:30 so we could get to a little of our other meeting. Maybe that's something that we could look at, because I know I've gotten quite a bit of feedback from those individuals that are part of this that would like to participate. And unfortunately, we can't split ourselves in 2. I do the best job that I can to do that, though.
Sure.
Just something for a future reference.
Is the request for 9:30 or 10 o'clock?
Would 10 give you more flexibility?
I think 10 would allow those individuals to, because we have great panels for discussion, some of them is hurricane preparedness coming up. That would be great if we could do that, we'd appreciate it. And that is June 23rd, August 25th, and October 27th. If that's available to the other task force members.
Why don't we just make it consistent for the rest of the meetings going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd open the question. I'd open the question is, I won't be here for May, but maybe effective June, we could just start at 10 o'clock? just to have consistency. I know we all like consistency in our lives. It's easy to remember.
Well, I say we start in May, Chairman.
All right, well, great. Listen, Matt, I didn't want to speak for you because honestly, I'll be someplace outside the country. So, great.
We will update the meeting invites to you all to reflect 10 o'clock.
Thanks for the input. That's helpful. Public comment?
Public comment?
Any public comment? You feel free to stand up and, feel free to come up and address us if there's anyone that wants to do it.
My name is Jim Schwartzel. Born here. Probably the most critical in my mind is the hardening of our electric system.
Yep.
I would really like to see if FPL or LCEC have representatives here as our utilities. I mean, if you remember Hurricane Charlie came in August. If we had had the same weather that we have for after Hurricane Ian that we had after Hurricane Charlie, people would have been really hurt. You would have had a lot more loss of life just because of the amount of heat and stuff that we were exposed to. Made some other notes, hold on. And plus with communication and all these other things, if we don't have electricity, it doesn't matter if you have a Starlink. Your generator is going to run out of fuel. You don't have a way to power it up. So, I mean, it's why we're not burying power lines from the beginning. I have no clue.
Great point. And quite frankly, I've been in communication with LCEC. I thought it would be better to have a separate town hall meeting. I think it would just take up too much of this meeting. It could take the entire meeting and then some. That issue's come up a lot. Many people have approached us. I was at an event last night where this subject came up. They want to continue to do that. So with this body's permission, I'll certainly work to try to get some dates, and we'll just have a separate issue with LCEC and FP&L, to talk about power, because I know FP&L helped a great deal, but that's something we can't, assume. I think people need to understand what a co-op is. That comes up all the time, and what potentially they have, the resources they have available to us. And there's been a lot of those conversations. I just think as long as everybody agrees, that meeting, and great point, is one that I think can fill up its own couple of hour segment. I don't know that we can put that in this agenda and have anything else to talk about. Is everybody okay if I reached out to try to get half a dozen dates from them, and I could circulate it back through Tanya and have that take place? Because I think it's something we all want to participate in. We're all affected by it. I look at my district, and I don't think any place in my district isn't covered by LCEC. So it's something that I've heard from my community and from my constituents throughout. Great point. Thank you.
I think that's a good idea. If you're going to have a separate meeting on that, I would prefer to have it linked to the end of this meeting as opposed to having separate dates, especially during the summertime with vacations and the like, if that's possible.
I'll do the best I can, Mayor. What I'm doing is trying to work with the CEO and CFO and some of the people there. So initially, my conversations have been somewhat restrictive in their dates. So I'd like to just get them into a room. I'd love to do it right after this meeting, but the same token, I think we all would like to have a conversation about this. And the sooner we could do it before hurricane season, the better.
Get vacations?
Mr. Chair, I think that's a great point, definitely, to have someone from LCEC and FP&L involved. Actually, we had that discussion back at our city that we were going to try to nominate someone to get on to the branch. I think that would be also important if those two entities could have someone engaged in the infrastructure component of the branches where they had that dialogue. So I would request maybe that as well, if they could appoint someone from their organization to be engaged in a part of that discussion when it comes to infrastructure here in our county.
Great points. I'll give everybody an update as soon as I have any input. Yes, Fred.
Oh, I was just going to make a comment, but you guys finish this up and then I'll give you mine.
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, Two or three things. One of them we've done, but we haven't done enough of it. We got to be more proactive, way ahead of a storm coming in. Getting all these volunteer organizations organized, because going back to Irma, Bonita Springs, we didn't have hardly anybody in there distributing food and water until the National Guard arrived, and that was about close to a week to 10 days after it hit. Ian was a little better, but we got a ways that we could go, and that's could easily be done by the cities and the county working together. It's, you know, you can't, it's like transparency. You can never have it too much. So that's number one. Number two, the subject of workforce housing has come up again, and Ian has put an extra boost in it that we need to do it, and I'm for it. But a couple things that I think that we need to make sure doesn't happen. I think Sanibel, I don't know, I'm sure Kevin and Holly Smith can tell us if I'm right, but you don't want to have workforce housing affordable that once it's built, the people in it own it, and then after a while they sell it at the market price. Because I know Bonita, we're pretty well used up on how much land we got left. We're not like Cape Coral where they got 40 or 50% to grow. So we cannot afford to give these guys breaks, and then the new owner of that affordable house, if it's put in their name, sells it at a market value, especially with the housing boom. So I'm looking for help on that. The last thing that I want to remind everybody, I think to the county's credit, they went back and they've retrofitted, I think twice, the arena, as it used to be called the Hertz Arena, to make it really, truly hurricane resistant. And we want to make sure that all these shelters are really, truly hurricane resistant. And just to remind you, 100-mile-an-hour wind, if you move the wind up to 120, it's 1.44 times more force, not 20%. If you move it up to 140, it's damn near twice. It's 1.96. So we want to make sure that all these buildings are structurally sound, because we don't want to have a catastrophe where people flee to a shelter and it collapses in the storm. That's it. Thank you.
Fred, I don't want to extend this meeting, but you can certainly get with Holly or I. There's some education components in the limited equity at Sanibel because it does have a lot of restrictions. It's not nearly as open market as you might perceive. Any other public comment? Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.